dark, dark land, there was a dark, dark forest. And in that dark, dark forest, there was a dark, dark hole. And in this dark, dark hole, there lived some dwarves. Say hello to your new home.
All right, we've sat down for a chat about dwarfs, if nothing else. Recently announced yesterday, A Game of Dwarves. I guess for anyone who knows anything about Zeal, the question has to be, what's with the fascination about dwarfs?
Well, I mean, dwarves are fun. I mean, mostly it's about the gameplay to us, and them giving us the ability to have fun. They're a bit silly. They dig, which really works with the gameplay we have made. And they're like sort of like the Lemmings characters that you can have a lot of fun with them, and it sort of makes sense because they look fun, they feel silly, but they're also this rich, pre-consistent lore about them. They dig too deep and shit happens. Then,
and that seems like the basic premise of both this game and also Dwarfs that you released earlier, that they dig and sometimes shit happens.
Yeah. I mean, there are a lot of similarities in that way. I mean, this is a completely different game in other ways. It's a 3D management game, but it still has all that key elements of both fun and tight gameplay with stuff happening if you dig too much.
So, in terms of the gameplay, exactly what's the player doing and how is he managing these dwarfs?
We took the indirect approach again, and I think really we should look at games like Dungeon Keeper, where you sort of say, I want to go dig out this area, and then you hope that the dwarfs are smart enough to go and dig out. And so the game is indirect. It's a little slow-paced than maybe a StarCraft, but we sort of like that you can have your time to manage and think and deal with your resources.
And is there a random element to it, or do you build basically ground for them to dig up, or how does that work?
We random generate the world because we think that's fun. Because every time you play it's a new game, not a new game, but you never know how to deal or what will happen. But then it's about building. You get to build and you get to choose what kind of walls you have and floor and a lot of like creative stuff that's happening in the new game.
And we talked a little bit about what can happen, but could you expand a little bit about what will you encounter when you dig?
Well, we don't want to spoil too much yet, but. You can think that it's both the classical ones, the goblins and the orcs, but then we have some more fun ones. We really try to put more inventive and fun monsters in that we'll see when we come closer to releasing things about the game.
And I suppose there will be combat at that point as well, or some sort of way to fight them off.
Yeah, there will be combat and there will be leveling and persistence and skill trees. So it will be interesting, I think.
Right. So when did you start working on this game and how far have you gotten?
We started working back late summer. And we're at pre-alpha, basically. So I mean, everything we have shown yet is very early visually. But the game is fully playable today, and we play it a lot at the office. So I mean, we got quite far, and now we're just adding on all the cool stuff.
And is this your first game that you're working with a publisher, or have you done that before? And what's the experience like?
No, it's the third game actually. The first game was Team Assault that will be released in February, which is a turn-based tactics game. The second game was Dwarves, that was released through Tripwire, which is both a developer and a publisher, and this time now with Paradox. but it's an interesting experience. But I really like Paradox because they give us the ability to be creative and do new stuff. And they dare to take the risk to actually put their money on projects like this. They're not so normal or and maybe not a first-person shooter or aiming to sell billions of units, and that's cool.
I think Tripwire they are also an indie developer of sorts, so they come from sort of the same background, but it's still different between something like Paradox and Tripwire.
Yeah, of course. I mean, the good thing with Paradox that they still have an in-house development team, but you will always see when you have a publishing division that they sort of like they don't work with the game anymore. So it's, you know, you're living in different worlds, and that's just what happens when you have different work. They do their work, and it's fixing things like this show with all people come and talk to us, and it's really important. And if no one knows about the game, no one's going to play it. So I mean, the publisher is really important. But of course, I mean, there's a lot of challenging things about dealing with the deadlines and agreeing on details with the game. But I think that's fun too.
And the game was announced for a few different platforms. Could you talk us through a little bit about the plans for the different platforms?
Yeah, I mean, we really will try to get the same game on all platforms. That's our goal. To us, the Mac and the PC is sort of the same, because both has a mouse and a keyboard, so it won't change much. But then we have the PlayStation, and we actually think we will be able to keep everything in the game, even because it's an indirect game. The controller works really well because you don't need to have super high speed to be able to do things, and we have developed the game with the PlayStation in mind, thinking like this is the kind of game that you could do this with, even though it's a strategy game, and it would still work.
And would you consider any sort of tablet devices for the game as well? I would imagine that could work well as well.
We've been thinking about it, but it would really need a new development cycle because it's a totally different beast to deal with. Touchscreen. I mean, there's so many options in the game and things you can click, and we'd really need to figure out how that will work. And it's also it's actually quite big when it's because all of the units that you can have on screen and all of the items. So it's actually more. It's harder on the CPU and the computer than you might think.
Anyway, have you got a date in mind, or sort of when do you think you'll be finished with it?
We're talking Q3 with this game this year.
Best of luck. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
What's the worst that could happen in A Game of Dwarves?